All right, so you're in the mobile talk. If you don't want to be in the mobile talk, you should probably leave, because I'm going to cover all mobile stuff. I think it's stuff that can be applied to other games. We're going to go through the history of mobile, which isn't that long. It's about 20 years in games at least. We're going to go quickly through the past. We're going to get to the present, and then we're going to talk about some key game virtues that I've learned through my career that I think can benefit you guys if you're working on mobile games. So we're going to get through 10 of them. And at the end of it, we're going to talk about those 10 and see if they're still applicable for today. So I'll give you one last chance. If you don't want to hear about mobile, you can leave now. No one's going to judge you. Everybody close your eyes so the people that won't be here can leave. No? All right. So yeah, there you go. I like that. I like that guy. Awesome. I'm glad you stayed, because I love mobile. I'm extremely passionate about the platform. I've been exclusively working on the platform as long as I've been doing production in video games. So it's near and dear to my heart. I think it has a lot of potential, and I think it has a bright future. So let's start talking about some of it. And let's start at the beginning. We're going to test out the sound system here. See how this goes. Let's hear it for the sound guys, huh? It's awesome. I've always wanted to do that. So it's 1997. Mobile games haven't been around for very long, 20 years. And Snake was the first mobile game, right? Not really. But it's the one we all remember. The actual first mobile game was a knockoff of Tetris on this handset, the Hagenuk MT2000. But nobody really remembers that because it was a handset that not many people had. It was sort of before its time. And everybody remembers Snake because Snake was on every Nokia handset under the sun. It started out on the Nokia 6110 as a custom programmed app, the only game on the handset. And it was very popular for that handset. Everybody loved to play it. So Nokia basically ported it to all of their handsets under the sun at the time. And it was what we refer to in the mobile industry as an embed, which means you couldn't buy it, you couldn't install it, it was just already on the device. It came shipped with the device by the manufacturer. At the end of the day, it didn't make any money because it was already on the device. I don't know if it sold handsets, but by the time that it sort of tapped out, it was on 350 million handsets worldwide. So I guess you could probably say it was the first free-to-play mobile hit. And one of the things that we're going to talk to and we're going to think about as we start talking about mobile, especially for today, is that on mobile, because it's such a ubiquitous platform and everybody has a mobile handset, for a mobile title to be successful, you really have to nail the acquisition. And back in the days of paid games, that was true. because you're going to drive revenue from the amount of money that you make on the paid game. Nowadays, on free-to-play, it's even more true because without users, you're really not going to get the conversion that you need in a free-to-play game. So remember this term acquisition, it's important. So the second thing that was interesting about Snake, that I think is interesting about Snake, is it was not a new game. It was actually quite an old game. The game originally appeared on a coin-op arcade game called Blockade in the 70s. And it was basically a multiplayer version of Snake where you could play and you had to try to block your friends out. So that was key, and it was the original money magnet, as you can see here. I love the old school marketing of those games. The second place it appeared was on an Atari 2600 game called Surround. If you're an old school gamer like me, you remember this game. It was excellent. It was it was a really fun multiplayer game at the time outside of Pong on the Atari 2600. And it was basically Snake. You had to try to make your friends crash. It was PvP. And it was also probably most popularly known as the light cycle game in the Tron coin-op, which is arguably probably the best mode in that game. We can argue that over a drink if you want, but I think it is. So it's interesting because what Nokia did with Snake, and in fact what the mobile platform did with Snake, is they took this old idea that had been around for a very long time and they made it feel new again. And this is something that I think keeps coming up on mobile as a platform, is you see these things that are old, genres or gameplay mechanics or games themselves, that mobile can make new again, introduce to a new audience, and in fact make it the most popular version of that game that has ever existed. So the third thing that I think is interesting about Snake is the gameplay. And I think it was the perfect game for this platform to come at this time. Now, back in the day, you kids may not remember, but there were no touchscreens on phones. They had these things called keypads. And we're not even going to what rotary phones are because you can look that up on YouTube or your Instagrams or whatever. But if you look at Snake, it was really great because it used the keypad to such great use. It was the perfect game for the keypad because all you need to do was go up, down, left, and right. And the keys were perfect for that. So you didn't really have to have a really complicated interface to play this game. The second reason that is awesome is because you can play the whole game on one screen. There's no multiple screens. There's no difficult instructions. Like, the game is right there, and you can play it. You can pause it. You can look back down to it. It works really well for a small phone handset screen. And the third thing is that it was just a super easy, accessible play game. Like, my mom could play this game on her Nokia, and she would get it, and she would have no problem understanding it. So this was a perfect design fit for the mobile platform. So we've hit three things that I think are important to know about Snake. One is acquisition is key. Two, what's old is new again. And three, a design fit for mobile. So we're going to take those three key points, and we're going to save those for later, because these are going to be the three tenets that we're going to start with to talk about where I think mobile games are going to be successful today. Should still be some audio. I don't know if you turn the audio down, but there should still be some audio. So this is part two. We're going to talk about where mobile games start to make money. So in order to sort of talk about the path on how mobile games made money, we're going to have to get a little bit of grognardy. And Ian probably knows this term because it was a D&D term, but it's basically someone that favors the old over the new. Right? And it has a tendency to be used in a connotation of like, we're going to talk about some technical shit. So you're going to have to bear through me talking about some technical stuff so we can get to the more fun stuff. No, I still think it's interesting. And I'm up here, right? So might as well. So the wireless application protocol is one of the first programming languages that was created for mobile. And it was an interesting programming language because it was all over the air programming language, and the games were basically created and sent over the internet on phones over the wireless network. One of the very first games that was sort of successful on this platform was a game called Gladiator, developed by a team called JAMDAT in 2000. And you can see a screenshot of Gladiator here. It was basically an ASCII version of rock, paper, scissors with two fighters fighting each other. You had to block the fighter. If he did a kick, you had to block high. If he did a low kick, you had to block low. So it's basically a PvP game you could play with people over the air. You could tell the graphics were amazing. And then we get to more client-based programming languages, probably I think around 2002, 2003. Java was everybody's familiar with Java, but J2ME was a mobile version of Java that was used on handsets around the time to create client games. And Brew was the other major language at the time, and it was a C-based language, and it was supported by Qualcomm, and Java was supported by Sun Microsystems. So you had these two programming languages that basically, most of the feature phone games back in the day were on. You had the North American carriers that were tied to Java, so at the time it was Singular and AT&T before they sort of merged. And then you had Verizon that was supporting Brew because they had a stake in Qualcomm. But then you had the European carriers, all you guys that grew up here and remember playing Java games on Orange and Vodafone. But then if you grew up in Asia, you played games on Brew, so it was this like really interesting thing because there are all these different carriers and all these different handsets that were sort of supporting these two languages. Not unlike what we see today with iOS and Android and sort of the battle going on between those two platforms, OEM manufacturers and whatnot. There was also a programming language called Symbian that was super powerful, but like nobody had it on their phones. So I guess you could say it's kind of like the Windows Mobile of today, but I digress. But the important thing to know is that there was a lot of handsets, a lot of programming languages, and there was this thing that we refer to in the industry called fragmentation. Sounds working, excellent. And fragmentation is a term that basically refers to how when you start with one permutation and you add all these other permutations, it just creates this really complicated operational task of making games for all these handsets, screen sizes, device, file sizes, processor, memory. And the teams that really mastered this, this space in the industry were teams that could master fragmentation. And there are teams like this, JAMDAT, GameLoft, Macrospace, and Hands On Mobile. So this is where I come in. So this is around 2003, and that's me, and that's a helicopter, and that's me yelling at a inflatable pickle with a top hat. And this is E3 2003. Before this time, I had done a little bit of work in video game journalism. I had actually worked on the Tomb Raider movie as a writer's assistant, so Ian and I share that in common. The writer didn't get the credit on the first movie, but he did get the credit on the second movie, Cradle of Life. And these are some of the first games that I worked on from a QA and a production standpoint. So one thing I want to do is we already talked about Snake and some things that were interesting about that game that we can take today. What I'd love to do is go back and talk about 3 games that I worked on when I was at JAMDAT, and take some things from those games that I think you can still learn and apply today. So the first is JAMDAT Bowling. You guys, if you had a handset at the time, probably remember this game. It was probably one of the bigger hits after Snake. And this was a game that, because JAMDAT could handle the fragmentation, they were able to really get it onto every handset under the sun. So this game was everywhere. And this is the game that built JAMDAT because it was on embeds, but it was also downloaded for money over the carrier stores. And it was on Brew, and it was on J2ME. Now, the thing about bowling, it was the brainchild of Zachary Norman, who was one of the co-founders of JAMDAT. And he always had this saying of making sure that when you make a game that you want a lot of people to play, that the game is familiar. And I think bowling, more so than any other game I worked on when I was at JAMDAT, really nailed that. It's a game everybody understands, at least in the West, and in North America, where JAMDAT was trying to conquer at the time. Everybody knew what bowling was, so it's not like a stretch to go, oh, there's a bowling game, what is that? 2, the gameplay mechanic, you could see, was really suited for mobile, where you basically had these gauges, you hit the OK button, and the bowling ball would go. So there was really only one button you needed to play the entire game, and it was the OK button. And then they later came out with another version of the game that was multiplayer, so it was actually really fun to be able to play bowling against your friends. So I think familiar is more fun is something that I always try to strive for when I'm creating games and I'm designing games and I'm thinking about what will do well in the marketplace. Because anything that's not familiar to an audience, you're just going to have an uphill battle in them understanding what you're trying to do and what you're trying to bring them from a proposition standpoint. So I think that's really important. The second game really needs no introduction, so I'll just let the trailer play. Oh, yeah! You want to just go kill some demons right now? That game was a lot of fun to work on. And, with Doom, it was a labor of love for John Carmack. And I was fortunate enough to get to work with John Carmack at the time, about 10 years ago when he was working on this game. And he, just like with Oculus and just like with VR, he becomes enamored with technical platforms. And he wants to really kind of tinker around with those platforms. And at the time, he was one of the few, what you would call, I guess, legitimate and traditional game makers that was really into mobile. So when he came to us and we had the introduction, he's like, hey guys, I want to build a game on mobile. We were like, that's awesome, let's do it, let's partner up. So we partnered up to make Doom RPG, and it was a collaboration between him, his wife, who ran a developer called Fountainhead Entertainment, and we knew we couldn't make the original Doom because we had these keypads, we didn't have the processor strength, and he was smart, he knew that we needed to solve this fragmentation issue if we wanted to be able to get this game to a bunch of different people on their handsets. So he came up with the idea to basically take the traditional Doom aesthetic and look and weapons and monsters and combine that with one of his favorite old school games, which was Bard's Tale. And we basically created this hybrid first-person shooter, turn-based RPG. And it did extremely well. And it was perfect for the platform. So again, it was a design that was fit for mobile. But in this situation, what we did is we took something new, just a little bit. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're taking something people are familiar with, adding an RPG layer, and it felt fresh. So in all of my design, whenever I make a game, I like to say like 15 to 25% innovation is key. Like any more than that, and you're going to risk sort of alienating your audience. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make a completely innovative game and it be successful. Like that happens sometimes, but it's much more difficult for people to get their head around a concept if there's not an essence of something being familiar to it. So I think that was very, very key learning from Doom RPG. And the final game that I'm going to talk about should be a game that everybody should be pretty familiar with. Oh, I forgot. There's one more thing about Doom. The right brand. So the right brand will resonate. And at the time, there was some branded entertainment on mobile. Gameloft was famous for taking some of the console games and bringing them over to mobile. But Doom RPG was an example, I think, where it was the right brand fit. So it was, I guess, probably what you would call one of the first mobile mid-core games, because you brought that really dedicated Doom fan that had a handset that would love to play. And then, Doom fans are legion, and they love John Carmack. So it was an excellent fit of talent, brand, and gameplay. All right, so Tetris. So you guys probably remember that Tetris was developed by JAMDAT. JAMDAT bought Blue Lava Wireless for $137 million. And everybody thought that was insane. At the time, it was one of the biggest mobile purchases ever. People were like, why are they buying this company just to get this one game? Well, JAMDAT knew that since they had mastered fragmentation, they could take this extremely popular game, port it to every handset under the sun, and make that money back pretty quickly, which they did. I think in the first year they made that money back, and the game ended up killing it as they were able to port it to more and more handsets. Because the interesting thing about fragmentation is that just because a handset is old doesn't mean it goes away. So as time went on, more and more handsets came about, and Tetris was basically ported to everything. And it ended up killing it, and it ended up becoming a massive mobile hit for JAMDAT and making hundreds of millions of dollars over its lifetime. And that ultimately is what led to the EA acquisition, but it was also key to note that this game had acquisition. It had done what's old is new again, right? It took an old game, put it on the platform. It was a perfect design. You could move the tetrominoes with your keypad. You could push down to drop them. You could press up to rotate them. It was familiar because everybody pretty much knew Tetris. They had added some new game modes and a new visual style, so it had a little bit of innovation, but not too much innovation. And it was the perfect brand for mobile. And that's what led to EA buying them for $680 million in 2005. All right. So let's talk about post-feature phone mobile games. And I personally, everybody thinks, oh, it started with the iPhone. I actually think it started with the iPod click wheel, because the iPod click wheel, 5th generation, was the first time that Apple decided to bring games to one of their platforms, mobile platforms. And it was because the device had a stronger processor, it was color. So when this device launched, it launched with I want to say maybe 9 games. And EA had maybe 4 or 5 of them. And there was Miss Pac-Man, and there was Mini Golf, and there was Tetris, right? So it's really interesting to note the iPod click wheel in the evolution of mobile games, because it was the very first time that we saw the App Store. And at the time, all the apps were $4.99. They were all the same price. You could buy them off Apple's App Store. You would sideload them into your Apple iPod, but it basically set the stage for them experimenting with what would become the iPod, with the App Store proper in 2008. So, while they were developing the click wheel iPods, the iPhone appeared, and the iPhone was a massive jump forward in smartphone game development. We had been working on games on Symbian, which was a smartphone platform. We had been working on games on Palm. Some smartphones at the time supported Java and Brew, but the iPhone was a massive leap forward. The only problem was the iPhone didn't support any apps at launch. In 2007, when it shipped, you couldn't actually get any apps. It was just the iPhone. So it was really interesting to note that we were ready to develop for it, but Apple didn't have a way to get any apps. And then in July 7, 2008, they released the App Store. And we had been working on a bunch of games behind the scenes, and the tales of our EA guys going and working up at Apple to get the handsets, to get working on prototype handsets. Is legendary. I can't talk about it though, because Apple's lawyers would probably tackle me. But then they also shipped the App Store in 2008. And the App Store, in my opinion, is the true innovation, because it was one of the first times, at least for mobile, that you could have this consumer accessible merchandising tool to basically show games, show apps, check out screenshots. And previous to this point, what teams had been doing on mobile was that, there wasn't a lot of space. It was a really small screen. It wasn't very sexy. So Apple really innovated on the marketplace. And I'm sure you guys still have AIM and MySpace on your devices today, right? So EA had made some games for the iPhone, and we're not going to go too deep into this period, because I think, the key learning that I take from this period is that on these devices, the processor strength, the memory strength, everything, the rendering had come so far. So what you're essentially seeing almost like mini console games in a way. At EA, we knew that we still had to make the games small and consumable for a mobile audience. But the real tricky part that it took us a while to master was making games for touchscreen. Your first inclination when you go from an analog to a digital input method is to just like take some of those things that you did on analog and do them on digital. And we did that. For like some FIFA games, we added like a joystick or a virtual D-pad. We did that for Madden. But I think the best games we made, and even today, the best games that you can play on these devices are games that really make use of the touchscreen. So I think that's still supporting a design fit for mobile. I just think it's changed, right? So like you have to keep in mind as technology changes that you may have to alter some of these virtues to suit how the platform has evolved. And at the time, I don't want to leave out Android, but at the time, the Android marketplace was also following suit to Apple. But there was an interesting thing happening outside of mobile that everybody in the industry was taking note of, and that was about to change everything. So what do we mean when we say free-to-play? It can mean a lot of different things, right? Just to sort of do a little sidebar here, you could be talking about free to full products, right? And the real innovator here, I think, was shareware back in the 90s, which Doom was a shareware title. Basically, if you don't remember this time of games, you could go to the store and you could buy a CD for 30, 40, 50 bucks, however much it cost back in the day, to play games or discs. Or you get these like magazine subscriptions that come with discs, or you can get the disc shipped right to your house, or like you're at a computer store and they're like, hey, have a shareware disc. And then you take these discs home, you put them on your computer, and you get to like demo the games. And Doom, that's exactly how Doom shipped the first time it shipped. And it was a real innovation because it allowed everybody to play the game for free, right, this acquisition thing. But if you wanted to buy it, you could convert it, right? So the barrier to entry was extremely small for these shareware games, and it worked really well. And today, lots of games are still using the structure, right, where you download a game on the App Store, and it might be a demo, or it might be part of the levels, and in order to get more of the game, you have to pay for them. The second one, I think, is probably innovated by, in my opinion, these two guys, which is durable virtual goods. Neopets and MapleStory kind of emerged around the same time in the early 2000s. And basically, you could buy virtual pets and Neopets for a price, or you could buy virtual characters and RPG gear and MapleStory. And when I say durable goods, for anybody that doesn't know what a durable good is something you can buy virtually that stays with you. So that's something like a character or a piece of armor. When you buy it, it's yours, you keep it. What the Facebook guys were doing, and some other developers in Asia at the time, which was really innovative, and even EA with one of their FIFA games in the mid-2000s, was innovating in consumable virtual goods. And consumable virtual goods is basically what we know as free-to-play today, where you have a resource, you can buy the resource, and that resource is used to buy other stuff, but that resource is consumable, which means it can be exhausted. And you can buy it and then you go to zero, which means you could buy it over and over and over and over again. And this model is why these guys were making so much money, was because they found a way through economy balancing and design to basically make people continue to spend money on stuff in the product. You can't talk about free-to-play without talking about ads. You can't talk about free-to-play without talking about subscription. I never thought I'd have a slide with Flappy Bird and World of Warcraft in the same slide, but there it is. So freemium is what we're going to talk about, and freemium is sort of the term that's used to encompass all of it minus subscription. Freemium, as it exists today, I would say is probably a combination of free-to-play and IAP, and the IAP can be things like durable goods or consumable goods, and you can even have ads in freemium games. So this is the free-to-play that we know and love today. There are two games that come to mind in my history. I didn't work on these games, but I remember when they first appeared, when Apple had allowed free IAP on the App Store in 2009, that they were groundbreaking, and they were sort of testing the market in regards to what free-to-play could do on mobile. And they were essentially an evolution of what we call today the builder genre, which is a genre that's sort of, became popular in Farmville, where you build stuff and you harvest stuff, and you eventually get a really big something, whatever it is, a farm, a town, a kingdom, Smurf village. So these games are really innovative, and even though Smurfs, I think Smurfs was probably higher grossing, and I think at one point it overtook Angry Birds in top grossing in 2010, which I remember like when we saw that, we're like, whoa, that's crazy. A free game overtook a paid game. We Rule is the game I like better. It was a game developed by NG Moko, and I just felt like it felt really right for the platform. I feel like it encompassed more of the tenets that I wanted to be able to talk about. I also really loved the song. It was kind of dopey, but for some reason it sticks in my head, and I remember it very vividly. The art style was really cool. The art style had this almost like pop-up book kind of vibe, and it was really the first time, especially at the iPad that had just released in 2009, where people were starting to experiment with the control mechanisms of how these free-to-play games could exist. And this was the perfect game because it was probably the first game that I think got that builder placing stuff down mechanic right. And they also took what's old as new again, right? So they had taken the mechanic in Farmville and brought it over to mobile, right? So that was a good first thing to do because it was familiar to people. It was a perfect design fit for mobile and touchscreens, right? It was one of the first times where you could actually drag stuff around, drop it down. These guys nailed that. Familiar is more fun because you kind of get it. Oh, I'm building a kingdom. The title perfectly encompassed that. Not only did you get the idea that you're building a kingdom, but it was a social game. So you're like, We Rule was the perfect name for it. A bit of new though, because it was free to play and they were adding some stuff that had never been done on the platform before. The right brand is the only one that doesn't apply because of original IP. But this game, I think, when I was playing it, it really cemented in my mind that free to play was here to stay. So I think, if you're making games on mobile today, you have to be thinking about free to play. Free to play is vital. Sure, there's paid games on mobile that are awesome. I play paid games on mobile that I love. They're amazing. But if you just look at top grossing and you look at the games that are being acquired on the platform, they're mostly all free. Now, to Ian's point earlier, that's hard though because there's so many of them. So, how do you stand out in a marketplace that is so impacted? And at EA, we had tried to do a couple of free-to-play things that I think were not working so well because we had seen in 2010, the first top-grossing game of the year, and this is top 10 grossing games of the year, so all revenue for the year. There was only one free-to-play game. We're like, okay, that's interesting, Zombie Farm. By 2011, there were 7. And in 2011, the revenue made from free-to-play games that year was higher than the revenue made from paid games. So it was just a really fast transition. It almost, to me, felt like it had happened overnight. So EA were like, oh, God, we got to make some stuff. Let's go. So we made some stuff that sucked, that didn't do very well. I worked on one of these. I worked on Road Trippin'. I still like that game. I think it's fun, but we didn't really understand free-to-play, and we were trying to do some new stuff. I think we were trying to innovate too much, trying to stand out from the pack. And none of these first 3 games that we made did anything. And we had actually acquired Playfish, and we're trying to take that knowledge of Playfish, who was a very successful Facebook developer, and bring it over to mobile. And we were struggling with that too. We took their most successful game, Pet Society, and brought it to mobile, and that thing taked. So we were really struggling to figure this out for the first year until we sort of a light bulb clicked on our head and said, well, let's start attacking it from a brand standpoint. Let's take some big brands and let's try to figure out if we can make free-to-play games that will do those brands justice. So one of the first hits that we had in free-to-play was The Simpsons Tapped Out.
What? Huh?
Oh, dear. I'm outside. Where'd inside go? What? Why are you doing this to me? Because if I tap you 10 times in this game, I get free donuts. Are you saying I'm not real? I'm just a character in a game? And there are free donuts? Mm-hmm. Let's do this, giant me!
Download The Simpsons Tapped Out for free and tap Homer 10 times in a row. In addition to in-game donuts, you'll receive a special bonus decoration.
This game is life-ruiningly fun!
So we were stoked. We worked with Fox Gracie Films to make this awesome game, and it took 2 years, and it was free to play, and it was we had the actors, and we had the artists, and we had the writers. We're like, hells yes, this game is gonna kill it, right? So we did a 4-day geo beta. Anybody think that's a good idea? It wasn't a good idea. Did a 4-day geo beta. We're like, everything looks good. Let's pull the switch. Let's go worldwide. Let's do this. So Friday on March 2nd, we launched the game, and it went right to #1. The fastest I had ever seen a free-to-play game go to #1, and it was just dominating grossing as well. We're like, all right, we did it. We had a party, margaritas, donuts. And then we started getting these reviews, and we're like, wait, why are we not 5 stars? What's going on? And we just said some people were hitting our server throttling error message, and we're like, okay, we put that there for a reason. That's good. It's good that's working like it's supposed to be working. People are hitting the throttling. That's fine. So we're looking into it, and we were accelerating at a user base that we were just not prepared for. So by March 4th, users were getting a different message.
Oh, come on.
And this message was the message that basically appears if the server is down and you can't get into the game. And we made a mistake. We were trying to be creative and be like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Bart was pulling a cord out of the wall when people got this message? It pissed people off, right? It was a bad choice. So we get in this message, and we're getting it multiple times, and majority of our users are complaining. We're dropping to 2 stars. We're trying to figure it out, and we basically realized that we have a problem.
It's broken.
And EA's official statement was that the servers had issues, and that's exactly what happened. The servers had issues. I'm not going to go into details about what it was because I don't want EA's lawyers coming after me either. But needless to say, as our first free-to-play success, we weren't prepared for the amount of users that came in. But I did look on YouTube, and I did see some kids that had posted some videos of what happened to the game for them if they ran into this issue. And you could see that basically when you could finally get into the game, once we took it off the App Store, which was unprecedented, by the way, people's worlds were completely corrupted. So they've got houses where they're not supposed to be. The characters couldn't finish quests because they couldn't get there in the pathfinding. And I mean, if I was looking at that video, I don't know exactly what caused it, but I would probably say database corruption tied to some sort of ELB errors. But I'm just saying that. So this was the first time that I sort of realized how important it was to have solid platform tech. If you're developing a free-to-play game, do not underestimate the platform tech, because the moment you have success and that thing goes down, it's one of the worst feelings in the world, honestly. So keep that in mind. All right. So in August 17th, we brought it back, and this is where I spent most of my time on The Simpsons Tapped Out. It was 6 months, was basically bringing this game back to life, working with the team to unscramble the mess and basically bring the game back up. And we did it, and it was successful, Woohoo! And it became EA's highest grossing mobile game ever. So that was awesome. The other thing I think this game did, which was great, was it was authentic. And this is something I really didn't learn until I went to Disney, but I'm applying it now because I learned it at Disney and I'm applying it back to Simpsons. It was a game that really fit the brand really well. When you played it, it felt like you were in Springfield. It felt like an MMO for The Simpsons. It felt like a Simpsons episode that would never end. It was funny. You had the voice actors. The art was amazing. It just felt right. And when you play a branded game that feels like a brand slap or doesn't feel right, you'll know it. And I feel like The Simpsons nailed it perfectly. They even made fun of free-to-play, which was hilarious, right? And it's probably one of the first games to actually be cognizant that it was a free-to-play game and make fun of the tropes of free-to-play. So then I thought in my head, I'm like, okay, well, this branded free-to-play thing is working pretty well. Where does the future lie? And I thought about Disney because Disney, out of all the entertainment companies in the world, had the most brands that could be leveraged for free to play, and they really weren't at the time. The time I went to Disney in 2012, I think they had maybe had a couple of free to play games developed by another Facebook company that they had bought, which was called Playdom. But none of them were really Disney IP, which I thought was really strange. And I was like, why are you not leveraging this massive, creative, billion-dollar infrastructure to bring those games to mobile free-to-play? So that's what I did. I went to Disney and started building mobile free-to-play games. And these are some of the games I'm proud of, building and working with partners like Gameloft, Kabam, and Hipster Whale on to build. But we also built games that Disney published with external partners. So one that I'm really proud of is by a Romanian studio that you guys may know, Mobility Games. I think they're here somewhere. Costi and Andre are here somewhere. But this was a game that was based on Frozen. It was Frozen Free Fall. It was a puzzle game, and I don't think any of us knew how successful this game was going to be. The brand was new. The mechanic, while Candy Crush had done it, we were like trying to figure out if it could be possible tied to a brand. But when it did hit, it hit big, and it became the second really big branded success that I had helped produce. So that game, has done over 100 million downloads. It has spawned some iterations. Basically created a platform for Disney. And Cinderella Freefall is also developed by another Romanian studio by the name of Amber out of Bucharest. So it really created a really good business for Disney. And it had encompassed all of the tenets that I had learned to this day. But there was a new one that I learned on this product, which was really live ops. And because we supported this game for 3 years, it was just an excellent learning experience to learn about a very dedicated audience. And our retention on this game was amazing. We still have people playing this game after 3 years. So I learned about retention, and I learned about all these crazy stats that are tied to creating successful free-to-play games. So as you guys are creating games now, know that I think that you can't do it successfully unless you know live ops. And if you don't know live ops, you need to learn it, and you learn it by doing it, in my opinion. So shipping games, getting that expertise under your belt, and I could talk for an hour about live ops. So grab me and we'll have a drink and we'll talk about it. But it's extremely important in this day and age, especially if you're working in free to play, to understand live ops. All right, how am I doing on time? Let's see. All right, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. I can go over a little bit because I started late. Is that cool? Do you guys mind? You want me to stop? So we hit 10, guys. We hit the 10 virtues. How do you feel about that? Wait, I think we have to listen to it, sorry. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I didn't mean it to go so long, but I wanted to wake you guys up, right? All right, future begins now. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how I think these 10 virtues stack up with today's hits. Pokemon Go. Everybody's talking about Pokemon Go. Game did a really fantastic job of nailing, I think, all these things. So had a massive audience. The brand helped it get there. So the brand is key for that. It took this old concept of geo-based games, which had been done before in their own game, Niantic's own game Ingress, but also in plenty of other games. Like I remember one of the very first games I played on iPhone when games came out and they were free. It was a game by Ace Steroids called Underworld Sweet Deal, and it was essentially Pokemon, but instead of collecting Pokemon, you were collecting drugs, but whatever. It was fun. And then, familiar is more fun, so they brought this idea of like exploring your environment to collect Pokemon. But they added some new stuff because it was on a new platform, and there are some social free-to-play features that were pretty cool. It was the perfect brand for that type of gameplay because people that had grew up watching Pokemon in the 90s, the millennials or people that were fans today, that vision fit what that game should have been. It was very authentic. It was free to play. Now, they didn't have solid platform tech, in my opinion. Like, they were down, if you guys remember, like, for the first couple days they were down, but they recovered. And that was important, right? It wasn't a Simpsons issue where they had to pull it off the store and come back in 6 months. So they were able to recover. So they obviously had some sort of live ops expertise that would help them get back there. If they didn't, can you imagine how bad that would have been if they had to come off the store? So I think that game hits all the things I wanted to hit. Clash Royale, one of my favorite mobile games of all time. It's probably the game I've played the most in recent memory. Massive acquisition. The acquisition helped that it was, the Clash brand. And you say, well, it's an original IP. And I would say, well, it's not original IP because it's based on Clash of Clans IP. So it's basically, what Clash of Clans made popular, they took that and made it Clash Royale. In fact, I think when it was in GeoBeta, it was something else. It wasn't even called Clash Royale. They changed it to Clash Royale. Actually, no. Geo, it was Clash Royale, but there was another title that was close to it that they had in Geo. Familiar is more fun, so it was kind of like Clash of Clans, but it brought some new aspects and innovation to the table, some arena-based MOBA type stuff. I think the design is probably one of the best mobile designs of any PvP game. Free-to-play, obviously. Platform tech is amazing in this game. The fact that they have those matches up and running so quickly, like these guys have mastered that. And their live ops is vital. That's Supercell. These guys are just amazing. They get it. Mobile Strike. All right, this is also in top 5 grossing. You might say, wait, Mobile Strike, that's not a brand. What the heck? But then you got this guy, right?
Howdy, stranger.
So they use this guy to help sell the game, right? And he's all plastered all over Facebook, and it's helping them, I'm assuming it's helping them get lower conversion on their Facebook ads so they can afford to have him appear everywhere. These guys, Machine Zone, I think better than anyone else, gets live ops almost like to an extreme. Like these dudes base their games off of retention almost solely. And I think they base their games off retention and mastery because like these games, if you've ever played these games before, they're incredibly hard to master. In fact, you can really never master them because they're always adding loops. They're always adding this stuff to take it to the next level. They're adding these social hooks. So this game really does a good job of taking the idea of not being able to master a game ever and just driving retention with this hardcore gaming audience. It's a bit of new. They took some stuff that they had done in their previous game and then kind of innovated on that here. And the design, these guys have proven that this is a design that people want to play in massive droves and spend lots of money on. And the last one I'll talk about is Candy Crush Saga. So you'll say, wait, Candy Crush, that's not a brand either. What are you doing, dude? And I'll say, well, but they had some other ones that came out that were based on that Candy Crush brand as well. So the games have been successful. So I think, they're again taking what's old is new again. They're taking a mechanic that people are familiar with, innovating it a bit, not too much. The designs obviously fit for mobile. Games are familiar. It's definitely the right brand, free to play. Their platform tech is very solid as well. These guys have a different skill set in regards to live ops, but they know their genre really well and they excel at it. And I think these games are just fun and feel right for the audience, right? Everybody loves to play with candy and jelly, gummy bears and soda. All right, so I went through that last part really fast because I don't want to take too much time up. But the question I'll leave with you guys is, now that you have those tenants, what are you going to be able to do to grow the mobile space? And how are you going to be able to take the learnings that you have working on your mobile games into the future? And I look forward to meeting with some of you after the show and having conversations about that. Feel free to grab me whenever, grab coffee or grab a drink or something. And I'd love to hear what you're working on and just talk about mobile games because I'm really passionate about it. Thanks, guys. Where's Catalin? Do I have time for questions, or should I just run off stage? Does anybody have any questions? Any questions? No? Yes? Maybe? No? Yes? Question? No? Yeah.
How about Angry Birds?
How about Angry Birds?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think Angry Birds in the era of paid games did a fantastic job of nailing a lot of those tenets. Now, it was an original IP at the time, and I think a lot of the early mobile games were original IP. But I think that what they've been able to do is sort of take that brand that they created and create extensions of it. Star Wars Angry Birds, I think, was like peanut butter and jelly. Like, that just was awesome, right? Who doesn't love Star Wars and who doesn't love Angry Birds? So they were able to leverage the brand. The design was amazing for mobile. It used the touchscreen in a really fantastic way. It was an easy-to-understand game. It was accessible. It was a bit familiar. If anybody had ever played, games like Scorched Earth or Gorillas back in the day, like those were physics-based games where you had to launch something and hit something. So the idea wasn't wholly original, but they had taken it to a level with the physics to make it feel fresh. The quality was there. It felt authentic. The concept is really weird, right? It's like you're birds fighting pigs, but it felt right. It just made sense. It's sort of like Plants vs. Zombies doesn't make sense, but it kind of does when you play it. So yeah, I think that game nailed all those tenets as well. Does that answer your question? Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah. You get a mic.
So you talked about live ops and data science and KPIs. And what would be like the top 3 KPIs which tells you that, yes, my game's on a path to success? Like
Top 3 KPIs to show you that you're on the right track?
Yeah.
Retention, number 1. If your game has awesome retention, that means that people are coming back. In free to play, because you're depending on people to spend money day to day, you need to ensure that they're coming back, right? If people are only playing for one day and then leaving, the chances of you kind of creating a customer, right? And this is where live ops is important. It's a very service-focused way of making games. You have to think about servicing that customer and bringing them back every day. So in my opinion, if you have strong retention, that's the number 1 thing you should be striving for. Like, if you're in GeoBeta, sure, you're going to be looking at monetization stuff. Sure, you're going to be looking at downloads. But like, honestly, the thing that the game team needs to focus on is retention. Trying to bring people back day over day. That's number 1. I would say related to retention is probably engagement. Making sure that your daily sessions and daily plays are high. Right? Like, if people are coming back 5 times a day and they're playing like 5-minute sessions, that's like 25 minutes people are playing a day. That's pretty good for mobile, right? It's for a casual game. Some mid-core games, people sit there and they'll play for like 45 minutes to an hour a day, maybe longer. You want to be shooting for that number in regards to engagement. And then I would say third is probably monetization, because obviously this is a business. You can't just have a free-to-play game that, like, you've got servers up, right? You're going to have live ops experience. You're going to have platform tech. It's expensive. So you got to make sure that you're converting people. I could go into an hour conversation about free-to-play monetization design and what's respectful for an audience and what's not respectful for an audience. But in general, you got to be pushing conversion. You got to be pushing your ARPDAU. You got to be looking for that right sweet spot to be able to have enough money to sustain your service, and then have some sort of margin there to pay for new content, bring out new stuff. Games like Clash Royale, I think, are really interesting, because what those guys have figured out is a way to do live ops without the content churn. So like, if you play with Clash Royale, you know that they don't do updates very often. They'll do or at least content updates very often. They'll do cards like maybe once every 2 or 3 months. Which is kind of long for live ops, but what they do is every couple weeks or every month, they'll alter the spreadsheet. And altering a spreadsheet with numbers behind the scenes is super easy to do. Like, all you have to do is send down an HTML file to the client, and like, everybody's changed, right? Like, that is really smart live ops, because they figured out a way to keep their costs down, but change the game and make it engaging. So retention, engagement, and then conversion, monetization. Cool? Anything else? No. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.